The king isn't particularly well. He could be more sick than we think. In a single night, the British royal family was rocked to its foundations when top secret news broke online. King Charles was gravely ill and would abdicate far sooner than anyone had imagined, handing the throne to William within months. Yet behind the storm of public outrage, Charles smelled something far more poisonous, seeping through the very walls of the palace: the stench of betrayal. The first thread led to a former maid of Camilla's, now in the service of none other than Andrew Parker Bowles, her ex-husband. And then, slowly, inexorably, a clandestine relationship that had endured in the shadows for 2 full decades began to surface. What began as a seemingly accidental leak suddenly sent the entire monarchy reeling, as though tugged by an invisible, malevolent hand. What exactly are Camilla and Andrew hiding in the darkness? What are these two souls, once so intimately bound, plotting against the throne itself? And above all, does Charles still have the time and the strength to unmask them before it is too late? This year, winter came to London earlier than usual. Cold gusts from the Thames swept through the ancient oaks of St. James's Park. But inside walls of stone many centuries thick, the air burned with a strange, unnatural heat. Just a fortnight ago, on a bleak Monday morning, the entire nation seemed to hold its breath. The Daily Telegraph splashed across its front page in screaming bold type: King Charles to abdicate within months, health rapidly failing. No named source, no palace spokesman quoted, only a photographed, classified document bearing the crimson seal of the Privy Council. Its contents were brutally clear. The king's health had deteriorated far beyond anything the public had been told. Prince William would ascend the throne before this very Christmas. The kingdom reeled as though struck by lightning. One question alone hung in the frozen air: why has the king hidden the truth from us? Can we still place our trust in a crown that deceives? High above Buckingham Palace, in the private apartments, King Charles III sat motionless by the great window overlooking the square. On his desk lay a mountain of newspapers, every headline identical. The palace conceals the truth. Is King Charles dying? William to be crowned in tears. Each word was a fresh blade in a heart already bleeding from illness. He did not weep, but in that moment, staring at a stolen photograph of himself in a wheelchair plastered across every front page, Charles felt a different pain: the agony of betrayal. Not from the cruel cancer eating at his body, but from those in the shadows who had chosen to drag him into the merciless light. "Who?" he whispered, his voice hoarse from recent rounds of chemotherapy. "Who dares do this to me?" The answer did not come at once, but the rage did. It flared violently, sweeping away exhaustion and the nightly torment of pain. Charles summoned Sir Howard, head of the Privy Council, and Colonel James Calderwood, commander of Royal Protection, to the Oval Room, the chamber that had witnessed so many fateful decisions of the British Crown. "I want to know precisely how that document left Buckingham Palace," the king said, his voice suddenly ice-cold, devoid of any trace of frailty. "I want the photographer, the sender, and, most of all, I want to know who benefits." Sir Howard bowed. "We will open a completely covert investigation. Not a single journalist will know." Charles nodded slowly. He knew the price of silence in British politics. This time, however, he had no choice. If the scandal were allowed to spread unchecked, not only his own reputation would be destroyed, the future of William, of Kate, of the 3 beloved grandchildren he cherished above all else, would be stained forever. Outside the palace gates, public fury had become a tsunami. News channels endlessly replayed old footage: the king, gaunt, descending from the royal aircraft in Scotland; the king, waving feebly at Trooping the Color; and now the ruthless analyses of medical experts. Given his current condition, the chances of His Majesty's recovery are extremely low. Crowds stood in silence before the palace, laying flowers and lighting candles. Many wept, yet darker voices also rose on social media. The royals have lied to us again. Do they think we're fools? It is time to end the monarchy. At Clarence House, Queen Camilla had virtually vanished from public life. She appeared only briefly at a charity reception, her makeup flawless, yet unable to hide swollen, red-rimmed eyes. Rumor claimed she had wept for days in her private apartments. Rumor claimed she had not slept in 3 nights. And rumor also claimed that she was the one now under suspicion. That night, as London sank into sleep, King Charles remained alone in his study. The autumn wind still howled through the window cracks, carrying the bone-chilling cold of the coming winter. And in that cold, a silent war had begun. A war whose victor would decide not only the fate of one dying king, but of a 1,000-year dynasty. 3 days after the classified document exploded across the internet, the atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace was no longer merely tense. It had become a deadly silence. The kind where one hears only the tick of a clock and the frantic beating of one's own heart. King Charles no longer appeared at the great window. He worked in a small room behind the library, lit only by the faint glow of a brass desk lamp that threw harsh shadows across his hollow cheeks. Only 2 men were now permitted entry, Sir Howard and Colonel James Calderwood. They would arrive, place a thin folder before the king, and wait in silence. And then that folder changed everything. Colonel Calderwood opened his black briefcase and slid across a screenshot. An anonymous account on an obscure leak form had posted the exact document the nation was frantically hunting. Timestamp, 2 a.m., 17th on October. The IP had been masked through 3 proxy layers, but MI5 technicians had traced it to a modest flat in Kensington. The tenant, Clarence Moreau, formerly personal assistant to Queen Camilla at Clarence House for 14 years. She now served as housekeeper at a country estate in the Cotswolds. The owner of the estate, Andrew Parker Bowles, Camilla's ex-husband. Charles stared at the photograph for a long time, as though trying to burn it with his gaze. Clarice. He remembered her well-rounded face, dark blonde hair always neatly pinned, the timid smile whenever she brought Camilla her morning tea. He had once joked that Clarice was the only person in the palace who knew exactly how many sugars the Queen took. Now that same woman had become the dagger plunged into his heart. "Bring her to me," the king rasped, barely above a whisper. "I want to hear it from her own lips." 36 hours later, Clarice Moreau sat in a windowless room deep within St. James's Palace. No handcuffs, no blinding interrogation lamp, only an old wooden table, 2 chairs, and a cup of cold tea in front of her. Colonel Calderwood sat opposite, his voice flat and emotionless. "You know what we want to hear, Clarice." The woman trembled uncontrollably, her hands clenched until the knuckles were white. 10 minutes passed in silence. Then, like a dam bursting, she broke into sobs. "I never meant to hurt His Majesty." Her voice choked with tears that fell onto the table. "They paid me. So much money. They said it was just a harmless post. I didn't know it was real, I swear." "Who are they?" Calderwood asked, ice cold. "A man. I never met him. He called from a blocked number, deep voice, very polite, perfect Eton accent. He transferred half the money to an offshore account in Jersey and said the rest would come once the post reached 10,000 shares. I needed it for my son, gambling debts." Clarice wept hysterically. She explained that the text had arrived pre-written via an app that self-destructed after 10 seconds. She had only to copy, paste, and press enter. No questions, no thought. She had no idea it was a Privy Council document. When the recording of the interrogation played in the small room behind the library, Charles sat like a statue. He did not blink. Only his right hand clenched into a fist so tight the knuckles turned white. When it ended, he asked one question, soft as a breeze. "The digital signature on the transferring account, did we find it?" Calderwood nodded slowly. "We did. The trail ends at a shell company in the Caymans, but before that it passed through a charity based in Gloucestershire. Its honorary chairman is Mr. Andrew Parker Bowles." The air froze. Charles closed his eyes. In his mind flashed Andrew's face, the charming smile, the firm handshake at charity galas, and the way he had looked at Camilla during Queen Elizabeth's funeral, a look Charles had spent years pretending not to see. "So," the king croaked, "Camilla's ex-husband is paying to destroy my honor?" Calderwood did not reply at once. He simply placed another photograph on the table. Andrew Parker Bowles, leaving a Chelsea restaurant 2 weeks earlier, beside Clarice Moreau, clutching a thick envelope, taken 1 day before the leak. Charles stared at it for a very long time. Then he smiled, a smile utterly devoid of warmth, filled only with exhaustion and bottomless pain. "Very well," he said, his voice barely audible. "Now I know where the enemy stands." Outside, rain continued to fall on London's rooftops. But in that room, a fire had ignited. The fire of vengeance, of wounded pride, and of a king who refused to be defeated by the woman he had once loved, more than life itself. The strange wind now had a name, and it was blowing straight toward the heart of Clarence House. The rain had stopped 3 days ago, yet London remained locked in a winter that felt endless. Inside Windsor Castle, where King Charles had retreated to escape the long lenses of Buckingham Palace, the air was so heavy one could almost hear heartbeats. The king spoke less, smiled less, and the pain from his cancer was no longer his only enemy. A deeper, more insidious pain gnawed at him every waking second. 1 month earlier, on a late summer evening at Balmoral, Charles had opened Camilla's laptop simply to find a document about an environmental charity they co-patronized. The screen lit up. Her email was still open. He had intended to close it immediately, but one subject line struck him like a fist. Remembering that night at Highgrove. Dozens of emails, some 20 years worth, dating from the very day Camilla became queen. Tender words, secret meetings in quiet Cotswolds cottages, private jokes only they understood, and complaints that, if only we had never parted all those years ago. Andrew Parker Bowles, the ex-husband the world believed belonged to the past, had never left Camilla's heart. Charles had sat all night by the dying fire, lights off, watching the flames flicker across his face. He did not cry. He only felt an icy void spread through his chest, as if part of his soul had been torn away. The next morning, he spiked a high fever. Pain shot from his throat to his ribs, forcing a secret hospitalization in Aberdeen. The doctors spoke of a sudden worsening. Only he knew the true cause. He had chosen silence. No confrontation, no accusations, no divorce. He would wait. Wait until the abdication was complete, until William's coronation was perfectly prepared. And then he would speak honestly with Camilla. "I will not let private matters shake the monarchy," he told himself each sleepless night as pain kept him awake until dawn. He still smiled beside her in public, but each smile tasted of ash. Now, with the names Clarice Moreau and Andrew Parker Bowles appearing side by side in the investigation reports, every piece suddenly fell into place with horrifying clarity. Charles sat in his small Windsor study, lamplight falling on the thin folder. He read and reread the photo of Andrew handing Clarice the envelope, then turned to printouts of the recovered emails. 2 separate worlds had just become one. "Not a coincidence," he whispered, voice raw from a lack of sleep. "They want me gone sooner. They want William crowned while I still breathe, so they have time to manipulate him." The thought made him shudder. This was no longer a mere emotional betrayal, the betrayal he had swallowed for a month, but betrayal of power, of money. of his grandchildren's future. He pictured Camilla and Andrew laughing together in hidden houses, toasting the day the king would be no more, planning how the queen's influence would control the charities and give them the life they had always dreamed of in their youth. Charles rose slowly and walked to the window. Thick fog blanketed the ancient gardens. He remembered Camilla's smile that very morning as she brought him herbal tea and asked after his health. That smile now sent ice down his spine. Sir Howard entered with a fresh envelope. "Your Majesty, we have monitored calls from Clarence House, 3 recent ones to a Gloucestershire number. The owner is Andrew." Charles did not turn. He only nodded. "Keep listening. I want to know what they say. I want to know how long they have been planning this." That night, William visited his father. He held him longer than usual. "Father, I hear the investigation is progressing. Are you all right?" Charles looked at his son, eyes suddenly blurring. He wanted to tell everything, that the stepmother William had always respected might be betraying the entire family. Instead, he only touched his shoulder. "I am fine. Just prepare well. Your coronation is closer than we thought." When William left, Charles sat alone again. He opened a drawer and took out an old photograph. He and Camilla on their wedding day in 2005, both radiant under spring sunshine. He gazed at it for a long time, then gently turned it face down. In the darkness, the king gripped the arms of his chair. For the first time in weeks, a new strength surged through him. Not the strength of a frail old monarch, but of a man backed against the wall. Andrew Parker Bowles had not slept properly in days. Since Clarice was taken for questioning, his phone had rung incessantly. Unknown numbers, wordless messages containing only an hourglass emoji. He knew what it meant from the people who once laundered his money. Erase everything. Now. Within 48 hours, Andrew had hired London's most expensive lawyers, burned every incriminating document in the fireplace, and, most crucially, prepared a perfect 50-page dossier designed to place all blame on Camilla alone. Forged emails, doctored transfer receipts, even an audio deepfake of Camilla ordering Clarice to post it tonight. The more people who know, the better. Modern technology had made fabricating evidence child's play. Andrew smiled as he held the file. He believed he had won. One well-timed leak to the press and Camilla would fall alone. He would be merely the ex-husband manipulated against his will. But he had forgotten one thing. The woman he was now double-crossing was no longer the naive girl of 1970. Camilla learned faster than anyone. An old contact in MI5, still indebted to her from the Diana years, sent a single message. "Andrew is sharpening the knife for your throat. 8 p.m. tonight, the Wild Rabbit, back corner table." Camilla did not hesitate. She threw on a camel hair coat, pulled a wool hat low over her face, and drove her black Range Rover alone out of Clarence House into the night. The meeting took place in a private room behind a quiet country pub. Just the two of them. No protection officers, no staff, no recording devices. Only the crackle of the log fire and 2 heavy glasses of whiskey. "Do you really think you can sell me out a second time, Andrew?" Her voice was so cold the very air seemed to freeze. Andrew smirked, clinging to confidence. "You brought this on yourself, Camilla. You signed every transfer. You kept Clarisse close. I'm just the innocent bystander you dragged in." Camilla placed a brown envelope on the table. "Open it." Andrew tore it open. Inside were screenshots of the Jersey account, the very account he had used to pay Clarice. The final transaction read clearly, "From A. P. Bowles, £250,000. His face drained of color. "How?" "From the same man you hired to forge your precious dossier," Camilla said softly, each word a razor. "You forgot that in London your money buys lawyers, but it does not buy loyalty. He still fears me more than you." Silence stretched. Only the fire crackled, and Andrew's heart pounded in his ears. Camilla leaned forward, eyes blazing like a cornered predator. "Listen carefully. If that dossier ever sees daylight, I will tell the world everything, not just the money. The nights you spent at Clarence's house when Carl's was in Scotland. The times you kissed me in the Highgrove Gardens the moment the guards turned away." Andrew froze. The whiskey glass trembled in his hand, amber liquid spilling onto the carpet. "Camilla," he stammered, terrified for the first time in his life. We're on the same side." "No," she cut across him, voice sharp as steel. "The moment you decided to betray me, you chose to stand alone." She rose, pulling her coat tight. At the door, she turned back once more and gave him an icy smile. "Thank you for reminding me of one thing, Andrew. In this love of ours, there has never been a same side. Only the living and the dead." The door slammed. Andrew remained alone in the empty room, realizing for the first time that he had just signed his own death warrant. He did not know that, in the shadows outside the pub, an old Clarence House servant still loyal to the king had heard every word. The phone in his pocket had recorded everything perfectly. 30 minutes later, the audio file was on its way. When Charles pressed play late that night, Camilla's voice rang clear through the silence. He stopped the recording, said nothing, only stared out into the fog that still shrouded London like a funeral veil. Now he had everything he needed. No more doubt, no more pain. Only the absolute glacial resolve of a king about to pass sentence. The real war had only just begun, and for the two traitors, there was no longer any way back. Days earlier, in the secret war room beneath Buckingham Palace, cold fluorescent lights illuminated charts, flow diagrams, and towering stacks of bank records. King Charles sat at the head of the long table in a gray polo neck sweater, eyes sunken yet burning with an almost merciless fire. Before him sat the four most trusted members of his inner circle. For 10 days, they had worked without pause under his direct order. "Follow every penny to the very end. I want to know where every single pound has gone." And now the full picture had emerged, more horrifying than any nightmare. The lead prosecutor began, voice steady and cutting. From 2005 to the present, a total of £42.7 million has been approved under the heading Charitable Activities, patronized by Her Majesty the Queen. The money originated from the Duchy of Cornwall, the Sovereign Grant, and several large private trusts. Every transfer bearing Queen Camilla's electronic signature. She clicked a remote. A red-arrowed labyrinth appeared on the giant screen. But the money never stayed with the named charities. It was routed through 17 intermediary foundations, most registered in Jersey, the Caymans, and Liechtenstein. Fully 68% eventually reached 3 small entities, and all 3 share the same hidden chairman. He uses a second passport, but fingerprints and signature match perfectly. Mr. Andrew Parker Bowles. Charles did not move. Only his fingers drummed lightly on the table, steady as the heartbeat of a man about to strike. "Continue," he said, voice hoarse but unshaking. "Once in those entities, the funds were extracted as management fees, strategic consulting, or property maintenance contracts. We have traced £11.4 million directly into private accounts in Switzerland and Dubai. The owners of those accounts are Andrew Parker Bowles and Queen Camilla." Dead silence. Only the low hum of the projector. The financial expert slid a final set of screenshots across the table. One transaction was circled in red, exactly 1 week before the king's health was publicly revealed to have worsened dramatically. £800,000 had moved from the Rural Heritage Fund to a Geneva account. Charles stared at the line for a very long time. Then he smiled, a smile utterly devoid of humanity. "Transition planning," he repeated softly. so they even calculated the day I would die. No one dared speak. Colonel Calderwood placed one last object on the table, a small black USB drive. "The recording from the Wild Rabbit, Your Majesty. Voice analysis. 99.97% match." Charles closed his hand around the drive. Its weight felt heavier than any crown he had ever worn. "Enough," he said, rising. His legs trembled from exhaustion and painkillers, but his voice rang like stone. "I have given them far too much time to dig their own graves. Now it is time to bury them." He turned to the prosecutor. "Prepare the complete file. It will be presented to the Privy Council tomorrow morning. No delays, no negotiations." To Sir Howard, "Inform William. My son must know the truth before the world does." To Calderwood, "And initiate immediate suspension of all the Queen's powers. From this moment forward, she signs nothing bearing the royal seal. She receives no visitors. She does not leave Clarence House without my written consent." Calderwood nodded without hesitation. When the room emptied, Charles remained alone. He extinguished every light except the red glow of the fireplace. He opened a drawer, took out the same 2005 wedding photograph, gazed at it one last time, then slowly tore it into pieces that fluttered to the floor like dead leaves. Outside, London slept on, unaware that beneath their feet a king dying of cancer had just signed the death warrant of his 20-year marriage. Yesterday morning, London awoke to -6 degrees and a sky the color of cold steel. No rain, no wind, only a heavy, breathless silence, as though the very heavens were holding their breath for something about to shatter. In the circular room of Buckingham Palace, all 17 members of the Privy Council had assembled by 8 o'clock. No small talk, no polite inquiries, after health. They sat around the 300-year-old oak table, faces ashen. At the head sat King Charles III in a black suit and black tie, the small royal cipher glinting on his lapel. The suit hung loose on his skeletal frame, but his eyes blazed with a light that chilled the room. Camilla was not present. She had been instructed to remain at Clarence House until further notice. The great doors opened one final time. William entered, face carved from ice. He wore full ceremonial uniform, bearing only the Star of the Garter. He took the seat to his father's right and stared straight ahead. Charles rose, no notes, no prepared speech. He simply spoke, his rasping voice filling the ancient chamber. "Today I have summoned you not to discuss war or the economy, but to defend the very survival of this monarchy." At his signal, Colonel Calderwood placed a small wooden box on the table. Inside were 7 thick red-bound dossiers, each nearly 300 pages, stamped in bold. "Top secret, Privy Council eyes only." "This," Charles continued, "is the complete evidence that Queen Camilla and Major Andrew Parker Bowles have, for 18 years, diverted tens of millions of pounds of public and royal funds into their personal accounts. This is the evidence that they deliberately leaked my medical records in order to destabilize the succession. Not a sound, only the crackle of the fire and the shallow breathing of the oldest counselors." Charles swept his gaze across every face, as though etching them into memory. "I have spent my life shielding this monarchy from scandal. I stayed silent when the press tore me apart over Diana. I stayed silent when the world mocked my love for this woman. I stayed silent while cancer devoured my bones. But today I will be silent no longer." He drew a single sheet from his pocket and placed it on the table. "With immediate effect, I suspend all powers and titles of Queen Camilla. She will no longer use the style of queen, appear at any royal engagement, and will be confined to Wood Farm, Sandringham, pending full criminal investigation. Major Andrew Parker Bowles will be stripped of all honors and privileges and prosecuted for embezzlement and high treason. He signed. The signature trembled slightly, yet remained clear and final. The stroke of a sword. William was the first to rise. He bowed to his father, then addressed the council. "I fully endorse His Majesty's decision." No vote was needed, no debate. Every councillor rose as one and bowed. The king's word was absolute. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, Buckingham Palace released an official statement, short but enough to stun the world into silence. His Majesty the King announces that Queen Camilla has been suspended from all duties and privileges owing to actions gravely detrimental to the interests of the nation. An independent investigation is underway. His Majesty affirms that no individual, regardless of rank, may place personal interest above duty to the people. No direct accusation, no mention of Andrew by name, but everyone understood. That evening, television stations broadcast the same image around the globe. A black car leaving Clarence House, carrying Camilla toward Wood Farm. She wore a long navy coat, no hat, silver hair tousled by the freezing wind. She did not wave, she did not cry for the cameras. Only her hollow eyes stared straight ahead, as though she had already accepted her fate. At the same moment, in his private apartments at Buckingham Palace, Charles sat alone. He opened the window to let the icy air flood in. On the desk lay the short letter he had written the night before to his 3 grandchildren. "My dearest ones, grandfather does not have much time left. But remember this, the throne is not gold or jewels, it is duty. Never let love blind your reason. Never let greed cloud your eyes. I made that mistake once. I do not want you to repeat it." He folded the letter, sealed it, then sank into his armchair and watched the London sky darken. He was exhausted, utterly spent. Yet for the first time in months he felt light. The truth was out. The monarchy was saved, and a dying king had stood tall until the very end. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, pure white flakes settling on the roof of Buckingham Palace like a pristine shroud. And the promise of a new beginning. In your opinion, was King Charles's decision to remain silent about Camilla driven by the fact that he still trusted her, or because he feared that exposing the truth would shatter something he was not yet ready to face?